ADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Lomé, 1 p.m. in Abuja and Port Novo. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Human Rights Watch again calls for the release of Nigerian ousted President Mohamed Bazoum and his wife. Opposition political groups in Benin pressure President Talon on national dialogue and reconciliation ahead of the country's Independence Day anniversary on August 1.
The so-called commemoration, being the last to be celebrated under the auspices of President Patrice Talon, should be an opportunity for a real gathering of women and sons of Benin and provoke a reconciliation of the nation with itself.
Senegalese President Diomaye Faye embarks on a two-nation tour to Togo and Liberia to strengthen regional cooperation and explore areas of partnership. And the Guinean Authority launches a state maritime company for export of bauxite.
The creation de cette société de transport.
The idea of creating this transport company is to exercise its legal rights, a right that is consecrated to the Mini Code and certain conventions that give Guinea the possibility to transport 50% of its extra minerals.
Stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Once again, thank you for joining our broadcast. The second edition of Newslink begins with the call for the release of Mohamed Bazoum by Human Rights Watch. It has been almost 2 years since the National Council for the Safeguarding of the Homeland, CNSP, led by Army General Abdurrahman Chani, overthrew the Nigerian president. Still in detention in an undisclosed location, the human rights organization demands his immediate release as well as that of his wife. Francis Boniface reports.
Mohamed Bazoum, overthrown on July 26, 2023, has remained under house arrest, making it difficult to communicate with his lawyers. This situation has been denounced by Human Rights Watch. The rights organization, in its press release published Wednesday, called on the ruling military to release him. The statement also denounces the legal proceedings against the ousted president after his presidential immunity was lifted in 2024. According to Human Rights Watch, this action by the military authorities is politically motivated. The rights organization believes that this prolonged detention of Mohamed Bazoum is part of a crackdown on the opposition and civil society. Every day Mohamed Bazoum spends in detention pushes Niger further away from the path to democracy, reads the press release by Human Rights Watch. As a reminder, in September 2023, Mohamed Bazoum filed a petition with the ECOWAS Court of Justice alleging human rights violations against him and his family. In December of the same year, the West African Organization's court ruled in favor of the ousted Nigerian president. In January 2025, Niger, along with two other Central Sahel states, Mali and Burkina Faso, announced its official withdrawal from ECOWAS.
Murtala Zubeiru's report, voiced in our studios by Francis Boniface. In Benin, a political group known as the Political Forces Consultation Framework is calling on President Patrice Talon to work to unite the Beninese people. Furthermore, the opposition is urging the Beninese head of state to launch a national dialogue and release the detained political actors. These demands come as Cotonou celebrates its Independence Day on August 1. Here is more with Sankule Janko.
The Beninese opposition's latest statement comes just days before the country's Independence Day celebrations, scheduled for August 1st. This celebration is the last under current Beninese President Patrice Talon. It is in this context that the consultation framework of the opposition political forces invites the head of state to unite the Beninese people. Antoine Guedo is spokesperson for the consultation framework of the political forces of Benin.
The so-called commemoration being the last to be celebrated under the auspices of President Patrice Talon, you agree with us that it should be an opportunity for a real gathering of women and sons of Benin around a common federative ideal and provoke a reconciliation of the nation with itself.
Furthermore, the Beninese opposition urges the Beninese head of state to organize national meetings and facilitate the release of political figures.
In the face of growing concerns, we are launching a pressing call for President Patrice Talon to resolutely commit to making suitable decisions, liberation of political prisoners, return of political exiles, political dialogue and national assistance to be in phase with the will of his people in order to give a particular boost and arouse popular support for this event.
According to the Beninese opposition, maintaining the electoral code as it stands and the lack of consultation could compromise the holding of elections deemed free, fair and transparent in 2026.
A report filed in by WADR's Aziz Adam Souley and voiced by Sankule Janko. Let's now take you to Côte d'Ivoire, which agreement is growing within the PPACI, the party of former President Laurent Gbagbo. Awa Donmelo, vice president of the opposition party, intends to run in the presidential election next October, according to our colleagues at Jeune Afrique. Donmelo recently called for other candidates to be encouraged within the PPACI. Christopher Ticho completes the story.
This announcement comes shortly after the leak to the press of a confidential letter addressed to his mentor, Laurent Gbagbo, in which he suggested opening the way for other candidates within the party, citing Gbagbo's ineligibility. For political analyst Dr. Aida Coupe, this declaration of candidacy could represent a call from fate.
Donmelo, for his strong points, starts with a very good international address book. He has a good background, and in the background, he fears that he will have to reject the candidacy of President Laurent Gbagbo, which, it should be remembered, is not on the electoral list, which makes his candidacy dangerous, even if everything is left to the appreciation of the Constitutional Council. These are the motivations of this candidate, Donmelo, who we must say is known to avarice.
But this interpretation is not shared by everyone. Journalist and political analyst Phyllis Bonney sees it more as an internally orchestrated political maneuver aimed at repositioning the PPACI in the presidential race.
When Mr. Donmelo does not worry about anything, it means that he knows what he's talking about. The candidacy of Donmelo gives the impression that there is a crisis in the PPACR, but this can be part of a policy of diversion of the party, of the entire left, to be able to position a candidate who will come out on everyone's back. I am convinced that there is no deep crisis in the PPACR between Donmelo and Laurent Gbagbo.
In a contest marked by the ineligibility of several major opposition figures, a consequence of judicial decisions, the question of alternative candidacies, often referred to as Plan B, seems to be increasingly pressing. As the submission of candidacies begins this Friday, July 25, the opposition continues to call for dialogue.
Correspondent Marcel Ariston Bliss report presented by Christopher Aticho.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Remember, we are live on WADR.org and on Facebook and YouTube at WADR. Now, Senegalese President Bassirou Diomaye Faye today embarks on a two-nation tour of West Africa. The head of state will make his first stop in Togo, where he will meet with his counterpart, Foya Singbe. Diomaye Faye's weekend trip concludes in Liberia with a scheduled meeting with President Joseph Boakai and the Senegalese community in the country. During engagement with leaders of Togo and Liberia, Diomaye Faye will discuss measures to consolidate bilateral relations, strengthen ties of solidarity, promote regional integration, political and security stability. According to a press release issued following Wednesday's Council of Ministers meeting, Bassirou Diomaye Faye's trips to both nations are at the invitation of the governments. While in Liberia, he will take part in the festivities marking the country's national holiday in Monrovia. The Senegalese head of state continued his tour to countries of West Africa to promote sub-regional cooperation, explore areas of trade expansion, human capacity development, and reinforce his regime's Pan-Africanist agenda. Meanwhile, the government of Senegal is taking a new step in the pacification process in Casamance. The country is receiving new demining equipment. A donation from the Japanese government is estimated at 2 billion CFA francs. The equipment received will be used to accelerate the clearance of land contaminated by anti-personnel mines in Casamance. The delivery of this equipment comes at a time of growing calls for strong action to pacify the region. The Action Network on Small Arms in West Africa, RASALO, welcomes this initiative and calls on the Senegalese government to work towards the reintegration of displaced populations. Lamine Diatta is RASALO's focal point in Senegal.
Le RASALO, à travers le Malao, le mouvement contre les armes légères en Afrique de l'Ouest.
RASALO, through Malao, the movement against weapons of war in West Africa, last week held a meeting to put in place strategies for the return and reintegration of the population displaced by the conflict in Casamance. What emerged from the discussions was the problem of movement, with activities that are suspended, and an urgent move in the region, in the Doucy department, especially in North Sidiak, where the humanitarian need is more than essential for the local populations. We wanted to discuss with the concerned populations because what we found was that the plan for tomorrow's housing was good, but it is not ambitious enough. There is a population of education, health and infrastructure, such as roads, as well as the need for psychological and psychosocial support. All these are important considerations for the people of Casamance.
Lamine Diatta, RASALO's focal point in Senegal. Away from Senegal, the Guinean government has just created a state maritime transport company known as Gutram. This new company aims to better exploit Guinea's mineral resources, particularly bauxite. According to the government, this initiative is part of a broader strategy aimed at strengthening the country's economic sovereignty in the mining supply chain, specifically maritime transport. More details with Augustine Koli.
According to the decree signed by General Mamadi Doumbouya, the Gutram company's primary mission will be to ensure the maritime transport of Guinean bauxite to reduce dependence on foreign companies and increase the share of maritime freight revenues in national revenues. Gutram is expected to eventually have its own fleet of vessels to make the government a direct player in the export of this strategic resource. Totia Bari, a mining specialist, welcomes this decision by the Guinean government, which he describes as strategic.
L'idée de création de cette société de transport.
The idea of creating this transport company is to exercise its legal rights, a right that is consecrated to the Mini Code and certain conventions that give Guinea the possibility to transport 50% of its extra minerals in the Guinean soil. It's a form of lucrative maritime transport activity. Until now, Guinea was exercising this right through other maritime transport companies, so they paid the fee. They couldn't fully exercise this right on 50% of the products.
Donc les 50% de la bauxite produite.
This project, if properly implemented, could enable Guinea to increase its mining revenues, but also strengthen control over its domestic production in a sector where economic and geopolitical stakes are high.
This right allows Guinea to increase additional revenues, and you know that the transport of bauxite is paid between $15 and $20, depending on the destination, whether it is in China or in Europe. So, when you transport bauxite for a mining company, they pay you and you increase revenues. In addition to taxes and taxes that companies pay, you also earn from the transport of minerals.
Guinea is currently one of the world's largest producers of bauxite, but the majority of the revenue generated by its transport still eludes the country. China, a primary destination for Guinea's bauxite, imported 79.67 million tons in the first half of 2025, according to data from the National Bureau of Statistics. This export represents 80% of Guinea's total bauxite exports.
A report by WADR's Conakry correspondent General Ibrahima Balde and voiced by Augustine Coley. More on developmental news. Liberia is receiving a major boost and expansion in the education sector as the government and development partners launched a project on Wednesday to construct over 100 new schools across all regions of the country. The new schools will primarily serve children at the kindergarten and elementary levels. Under the Excellence in Learning in Liberia project, existing learning facilities will receive an upgrade to modern-day standards. The $86.6 million initiative is part of the country's broader vision to improve access to quality education for every child, supported by the World Bank. And just before the break, in Ghana, Finance Minister Dr. Kasil Ato-Forsil is set to present the 2025 Media Budget Review to Parliament. The address is expected to highlight the state of the economy, assess the government's fiscal performance over the first half of the year, and outline policy shifts and spending priorities for the remainder of 2025. The review comes at a time when signs of economic recovery are emerging and public interest in Ghana's progress under the IMF program is growing. From Accra, Nadiri Tete reports.
The Media Budget Review, mandated by the Public Financial Management Act, allows the Finance Minister to report on the implementation of the national budget, highlight economic trends, and propose any necessary adjustments. Dr. Kasil Ato-Forsil is expected to give a detailed account of revenue performance, expenditure, debt servicing, and measures aimed at sustaining the ongoing recovery. He will also address whether the government is on track to meet its end-year fiscal targets. Financial security expert Dr. Philip Tichi has been speaking about his expectations ahead of the presentation of the Media Budget Review.
Expectations are high that government will prioritize structural reforms and fiscal discipline to consolidate recent economic progress. We need policies that reduce pressure on the Bank of Ghana's reserves while incentivizing export growth, diaspora investments, and local production. It's my expectation that this budget review expands tax incentives for SMEs, that it goes to boost support for local industries and streamlines public expenditure, which will go a long way to not only maintain investor confidence, but also reinforce the real economy. The focus must shift from short-term stabilization to long-term resilience.
Recent Bank of Ghana data shows positive economic momentum. Real GDP grew by 5.3% in Q1 of 2025, with strong gains in agriculture and services. Non-oil GDP rose by 6.8%. In private sector, credit jumped to 19.9% in April from 10.8% last year. Business activity and consumer confidence are improving, while Ghana recorded a $5.6 billion trade surplus and a $3.4 billion current account surplus in H1. Dr. Ato-Forsil is expected to brief Parliament on IMF program progress and reaffirm commitment to reforms. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. We're live on WADR.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Human Rights Watch again calls for the release of Nigerian ousted President Mohamed Bazoum and his wife. Opposition political groups in Benin pressure President Talon on national dialogue and reconciliation ahead of the country's Independence Day on August 1. Senegalese President Diomaye Faye embarked on a two-nation tour to Togo and Liberia to strengthen regional cooperation and explore areas of partnership. The Guinean authority launches a state maritime company for export of bauxite. And in the news, we have the press review, a guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Many thanks for staying with us. Let's now take you to Nigeria, where controversy continues to trail the suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, who was on Tuesday barred from entering the National Assembly complex despite a court ruling that declared her suspension illegal. The federal lawmaker has vowed to challenge the Senate's actions in court, accusing the leadership of undermining the judiciary. WAD's Usman Omar has more reactions in this report.
We are not giving authority to allow her to come into the complex.
The embattled senator, backed by supporters and rights activist Aisha Yesufu, had arrived in a determined bid to resume her legislative duties, but the gates remained shut. Senator Natasha told journalists at the scene that she was heading back to court, this time to seek a clear judicial interpretation of what she called a contemptuous act by Senate leadership. A lawyer and human rights activist, Precious Oruche, insists that the court ruling ordering her reinstatement remains binding regardless of any pending appeal.
It's stated clearly in the Constitution that the judgment is a decision of the courts. That's what a judgment is, decision of a court. And this decision can come in different ways. Do you understand? It can come as a recommendation, it can come as an order, it can come as a conviction, it can come as a statement. The Constitution also stated clearly in section 218 that any decision of the court is binding on any institution across the federation.
But legal opinions on the matter are now divided as a lawyer, Ekene Elechi, questioned the senator's decision to enforce a ruling she had also appealed.
The judgment is very elaborate, and in fact, it has even offered more than the road order, presented. And it is very clear. My Lord has not said, recall Senator Natasha. What the judge said was that you cannot do like this, you cannot do like that, and then makes a recommendation to the Senate and says, Senate, think of how you can amend your rule. That does not say, that you cannot equate that to say, recall Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan.
The Senate, unmoved, has reiterated that the federal lawmaker would remain suspended until September 2025 when her sanction expires. It cited no legal compulsion to act otherwise. For now, Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan remains a senator locked out of the chamber and tied in a legal standoff with Nigeria's legislative elite after accusing Godswill Akpabio, president of the Senate, of sexual harassment. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Omar reporting from Abuja.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's now join WADR's Nadiri Tate in Accra, Ghana for today's press review.
Greetings, you're welcome to the newspaper review segment. We'll start off with the Daily Graphic newspaper front page. Stop funding foreign degrees, channel money into local universities. Pro Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana, Professor Awendare, advocates. Other stories here: Supreme Court rules in favor of Nitaki Teko II, and government to introduce new anti-witchcraft bill in Parliament. And mining contributed $7 billion to economy. That's according to the Chamber of Mines. Now to the Ghanaian Times newspaper front page. Galamsey fight, it's a marathon, not sprint. We'll win it. That's according to the sector minister Emmanuel Kofi-Boa. Government targets $500 million share market with revamping of PBC Limited. Other stories here: court grants Dr. Abdul Hamid and others 14 million Ghana cedis bail. The Chronicle newspaper: Forestry Commission boss sues Abronia DC for 20 million cedis, and I haven't bought cars for Legon girls. Angry Sami Jimfi sues Ifya Schwarzenegger for 10 million Ghana cedis. The Daily Democrat newspaper: Cabinet approves sustainable jobs mining plan. Government pays all capitation grant arrears since 2023. And at a Mills, a model for leadership, Julius Debra says. Daily Guide front page: Ashanti Kusasi chief shot dead. Top investigators hunt for culprits. And Tokonu to no fate, July 31. And NPP slams NDC over Galamsey surge. Would end with the Daily Post newspaper front page: Bosts and Tema Oil Refinery sign MOU to strengthen Ghana's downstream sector. And Finance Minister to present mid-year budget review on July 24, 2025. That'll be it for the newspaper review segment. It's back to you in the studio.
Many thanks, Nadiri Tate.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is a guest.
We remain in Ghana for the guest interview following a scheduled presentation at the Parliament of the country's media budget by Finance Minister Dr. Kasilato Fonson. Business and financial consultant Harrison Ahogba says he will be surprised if the government requests a supplementary budget as he speaks of his expectations ahead of the reading.
Having the changed government and the economic indicators, we had what had happened before the elections and all. So the essence of this budget, as the case may be, is to review what might have been done the past 6 months and then what is expected to be done before the end of the year. It's become an annual activity to be conducted by the finance minister. So there are various indicators that we are looking at from the business world. So let me put them in some thematic areas. We are looking at revenue generation. We are going to look at the policy direction. We're also going to look like issue of inflation and its impact on the market. And I will look at some other things about how government intends to spend. So for my expectation, when it comes to the revenue generation, just about some 3 weeks ago, we started having this discussion of the D-levy, which the government mentioned is supposed to bring in some amount of money to clear the energy sector levy. I don't know whether you recall.
Yes, I do, which is taking effect actually. It took effect on July 16.
Awesome. So what it means is that there's expectation that some money will come from us. Aside the backlash, the reason given is to clear the energy sector levy. So that will be part of the revenue generation drive. Now we come to government spending. Over time, we have realized that there were a lot of audits being conducted after the elections to ascertain whether some people should be paid, especially the contractors and all, where you had a minority and some members saying that there are no funds to spend because government is really not releasing funds. We had from the presses that it held that the money will be released very soon, but the government, through the president, mentioned that some amounts will be mentioned. The road minister also confirmed that. So there's expectation to be that some mention will be made of funds to be released into the economy for some things to be done. And then you realize largely the payment for some debt that we were owed. If you remember the haircuts and the other issue in the international market, some payments also be done. Now, when we come to the other policy direction, the inflation rate has significantly reduced. Now we are looking at very low rate, about 13. In fact, the projection is that by the end of the year should go to a single digit. So this inflation rate will obviously affect some other indicators, including the treasury bill rate, the monetary policy, and also generally, I'm expecting these thematic areas I've mentioned to have some traction.
Would you expect to hear government also, for instance, introduce measures, not necessarily taxes, but introduce measures to ramp up, revenue mobilization?
Over the years, we've always advocated for the tax net to be expanded, not from the direct tax perspective. The informal sector, very large and quite unregulated when it comes to activities of taxation. So you and I, who are on the direct tax platform, we tend to pay a lot. So in fact, the tax penetration at the informal sector is low. And lately, you heard the GRA mention that they are now going to develop a strategy to make sure everybody in the informal sector is roped in. So I don't expect to have any new tax per se, but the current structures, it's about the enforcement. So we have the various tax at the informal sector, even to the local district level where the tolls are collected, how are we using them. So there are lots of internally generated funds we can get from the informal sector to push up you and I who appear to be in the formal sector. So that would be my expectation of what measures we are bringing on board. In fact, efficient measures, because they are there already. It's about its implementation, monitoring, and how best we can take advantage of them.
Harrison Ahogba is a Ghanaian business and financial consultant. In the sporting world, some members of Nigeria's Super Falcons have visited South African forward Gabriela Salgado in the hospital following the serious leg injury she sustained during the Women's Africa Cup of Nations semi-final clash between both teams in Morocco. Salgado was stretched off in the 80th minute of the intense encounter on Tuesday after suffering what was later diagnosed as a mid-shaft fracture of her left leg. According to the South African Football Association, she has since undergone surgery at the hospital in Casablanca and will be out of action for the remainder of the year as she continues her recovery. Meanwhile, Super Falcons are set for a final match against their Moroccan counterparts over the weekend. In other news, hundreds of athletes from African nations have converged on Algeria for the inaugural Africa School Games. The event, organized by the Association of National Olympic Committees for Africa, ANOCA, includes competition in 10 disciplines: athletics, badminton, basketball, beach volleyball, canoeing, football, swimming, table tennis, cycling, and taekwondo. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and special thanks to Falil Sow and Sheikh Njai for technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR News, on Facebook, West Africa Democracy Radio, and stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a rebroadcast of WADR's environment program, Enviroscope. I'm Abdullah Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot